Tropical storms, flooding, wildfires, droughts, shrinking fish catch. In a world of ever-increasing uncertainty, nothing is predictable. The smallest stumble or fumble easily ends in a mighty tumble, with your world crashing down around you. Don't crumble. Glyco always has your back. Glyco, we cushion you for life.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HR Digest brought to you by Sedat Consults. At Sedat Consults, we are committed to empowering HR professionals, and the HR Digest serves as a platform for sharing and growth. Sedat Consult is your go-to and number one partner when it comes to all HR solutions. Do feel free to contact Sedat Consult on all the contacts that will be displayed on the screen, and would be glad to assist you with all your HR issues. Our guests who have joined in today, we are so grateful you could take time off your busy schedules to join us, and would love to interact with you. Kindly drop your name and your location in the chat box, and we'll duly acknowledge you as we go by. And when the discussion starts, please feel free to drop your questions, your suggestions, and insights on the topic that we'll be discussing today. Once again, you're welcome to the HR Digest brought to you by Sedat Consult. Today, we are discussing the topic, drafting employment contracts and HR policies. As HR professionals, this key function is one of the core tasks that HR professionals are given in every organization. And it's prudent that we take time and learn and share, so we're able to keep up with the best practices to help us strengthen our policies and stay in compliance with regulations. To do this session with me today is Mr. Abubakar Kwame Esuman. He is our guest speaker for this session. Mr. Abubakar Kwame Esuman is an esteemed HR professional with over 18 years of experience in the HR practice. He's currently the Director of HR and Administration at Valco, and he brings on board expertise in various aspects of HR, such as strategy development, performance management, and policy drafting. So we know that he is well equipped to take us through this topic, and we promise that at the end of this session, we're going to go away with a lot of nuggets to help us as professionals. In a few seconds, we'll be adding on Mr. Suman. Then we can dive straight into the business of today. Once again, you're welcome to the HR Digest brought to you by Sedat Consults. I am Etonon Kovi, your host for the day. And our guest, Mr. Abubakar Kwame Isuman, will be joining us soon. Our guest, Mr. Abubakar. Hello, Mr. Isuman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Etonam.
How are
How
you
are you?
doing? I'm all
I'm
right. What about you?
well. Yourself?
I'm all right. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Yes, it's great and a privilege to be back here. I know it's the first time we are doing this, me and you,
Yeah,
but I'm no stranger to to this platform. So, and
right.
I cherish my the moments I share with your viewers here. So, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And we are so grateful that you've granted us this opportunity to share the nuggets on the topic that we have for today. We are grateful and we don't take it for granted at all. And we hope to see more of you again in other sessions. Right.
Hopefully, yes.
Yes. So I think we can go straight into today's business, which is drafting employment contracts and HR policies. As I mentioned earlier, drafting contracts are like a key function for every HR professional, and it is prudent for us to stay abreast with the ever-changing trends, compliance, regulation, and everything that has to do with staying in compliance with our contracts and our HR policies. That being said, if you can kindly share some essential clauses we can include in our employment contracts to ensure compliance with the regulations we have here in Ghana.
All right. Thank you, Etonam. So basically an employment contract is a contract like everything else between two parties, and because it's a contract, it's regulated by law. So in Ghana, the Labor Act, section 13, speaks about the employment contract and stipulates in schedule 1 what the key, which for me I call them the basic clauses that should be in an employment contract. Of course, it doesn't mean that is the only clauses you can have, but if for nothing at all, an employment contract must serve or must have these. First and foremost is the name of the employer, the name of the employee, the date of appointment, what the employee is being hired for, the job title or the grade, the rate, or I'll say the salary. At the end of the day, you don't want there to be any ambiguity as to how much someone will be paid for their services. So that is clearly stated in the contract. The hours of work, what the hours of work should be. Then the holidays or the leave that the person is entitled to, conditions relating to sickness or incapacitation, because yes, we are humans. If should something happen to the employee, what are the guidelines to be followed? Then the person's pension or the SNIT, Social Security, should also be stated in there. Then, in terms of notice, how much notice should be given if each party wants to sever the relationship. Then, disciplinary rules applicable, procedure for handling grievance. Then you also have when the person should expect to be paid. That should be stated clearly. Then the date that the contract is signed, signature of the employer, signature of the employee. All of these are aspects or clauses that have to be found, at least per the Labor Act 2003. But I'll also advise, or it is advisable, to go beyond the bare minimum. And as I've already indicated, it's a contract between two parties. Make sure everything is on the table. Nothing is hidden from each party, only for something to happen, and then you spring a surprise on the party to the contract, in this case, maybe the employee. And so you also want to mention what the probation or the probationary period is, even though the Act does not specifically state. There is mention of probation in the Labor Regulation 2007, that is the LI 1833. Of course, it doesn't prescribe the period. So it's the reason why it is important that both parties know what the probation period is and what to do when or during that period. There's also confidentiality clauses that have to be put in there. You don't leave that to chance. You don't assume that whatever information that comes or becomes available to the employee, they will keep quiet about it. If you want them not to talk about it to somebody else, make sure this is covered. And that is while the person is in employment, and even if the person leaves your employment. And then, of course, a contract of employment cannot have everything. So it's the reason why there is an HR policy which will be binding, or which will regulate the employee's behavior in the organization. So it's important that you make reference to that document, make it available to the employee so you can mention that there is also that document which will be made available to the employee when they join the company, and they'll be required to read, understand, and sign. Of course, once they are within the probation period, each party can decide to step away at any time. So maybe after reading your HR policies, the person may feel that, well, these are things I don't want to be binded by, so they can exit during the probation period. But it's important that you make this known in the employment contract. So I think fairly, if you are able to bring these clauses in the contract, you would have significantly satisfied the law and even more. Thank you, Attorney.
Okay, right. So essentially, a contract is an agreement between two parties. And then when it comes down to employment, we are looking at various terms of employment being stated in the contract. And as Mr. Isuman has clearly stated, some of these clauses are stated in some of our regulations and acts. And it's upon us as HR professionals to do our due diligence to ensure that all the clauses in there are in compliance. Thank you, Mr. Isuman. Right. So as contracts, we know there are various forms of employment contracts. And I'm curious to know what the key differences are between fixed term and permanent employment contracts. Are there any differences? Are there any similarities that you may want to throw some light on for us to take some notes on?
All right, sure. Thank you very much. And thanks for this question. I've realized throughout my work or doing this job that sometimes some HR practitioners are not able to take full advantage of the types of contracts and apply them to the situation as they should. So in terms of fixed term, of course, there's with the types of contracts, there's a permanent contract as we know it, or a regular contract. There is casual, fixed term, and what have you. So specifically regarding the difference between a fixed term contract and a permanent contract, it's important I mention that employers will usually use a fixed term contract for specific projects or seasonal work, or when they are unsure about the long-term needs of the entity. And so you want to give the person maybe a 1-year contract, a 6 months contract, just to cover the period you need a person to work for you. Whereas a permanent contract are used for core roles, because you know that, of course, an organization is supposed to be a going concern. So once you are hiring somebody, you are not putting a timeline to it, because you assume that the person will be there for as long as the organization is there, or up to when the person will go on retirement, whichever one is earlier. So that is what a permanent contract is. But in terms of the differences, you will find the differences in maybe 4 or 5 areas. One of them being the duration. And as the name suggests, fixed term contracts. If it's fixed term, what it means is that the duration has an expiry date. Unlike a permanent contract that does not have any such termination date in there. So that is one key difference, the duration. Whereas a fixed term contract has an end date, a permanent contract continues indefinitely. Yes. Then there is also job security. Of course, a fixed term contract by its nature doesn't have job security. Your security is up to the tenure of the contract. So if it's a 6 months contract, then that is how long you have to work in the organization. While a permanent contract, of course, there's a higher job security. Of course, no job is secured permanently, but relatively or comparatively, a permanent job has a higher job security than fixed term contract. Then in terms of benefits, usually a fixed term contract has specific benefits to it, and most often than not, those benefits are typically less than what a full term or a permanent contract will give you. A permanent contract will have the full benefits, but fixed term contract, you are coming in for a period of time, and so your terms and conditions are specific to whatever it is you are going to do for the company. Maybe you want somebody to come and fix something for a period. You are given a contract for that period, and you negotiate whatever your earnings or your compensation is for that period. You don't get things like health benefit and retirement benefit and stuff like that. So whereas a permanent contract will have the full benefits, fixed term contract will have minimal benefits. And then there is also the termination, of course. Right from the word go, when a fixed term contract is due to terminate, and when it terminates, you don't require to give anybody any notice. I hired you for 6 months. I don't have to remind you when the 6 months is up. I don't have to give you any notice so if after the 6 months you are still coming to work, I'll be wondering what's happening. But for a permanent contract, there will be exit clauses in there to indicate that, well, if you want to exit, or if any of the parties want to exit, they will have to give a certain notice period, or payment in lieu of notice. So and then in the case of fixed term contract, there is no severance package, but usually for a permanent employee, if if the relationship is severed in a certain way, there may be severance packages that will be due. So, by and large, I believe these are the differences I can think of. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. I think for many of us, sometimes we do interchange some of the clauses in there, putting in some fixed term clauses in permanent employment contracts. So we're grateful for the clarity on the differences. And I'm taking notes, and I hope our audience is also taking notes because this is some great learning for us to right some of the wrongs that we make in drafting some of our contracts. Thank you very much, Mrs. Suman. Grateful. Right. So delving straight into HR policies, I think you mentioned earlier that the agreement is usually at the start of the term, the employment term. But once you get in, there are policies that would govern the work, the operations, right? So it's prudent that every organization should have some form of HR policies in place. So, my next question for you, Mr. Suman, is what are the core HR policies that every organization should have in place?
Okay. Wow. Cool. There'll be a lot, huh? But let's do this. So let's start from uh, the beginning. So even before you bring someone into the organization, you have to go through a certain process. So let's say the recruitment and the hiring process, you must have a policy to govern that. And this will outline the process for attracting, for selecting, and for onboarding new hires. It's important. Usually, this activity is done by various stakeholders. Usually sometimes people think that it's HR that recruits, but the hiring managers are the key persons in the process. So HR only facilitates. So you need a policy that will set out the guidelines for every party to know what role and responsibilities they have in the process. So that's very important. How the candidates should be handled in the process to make sure that you are treating people fairly and what have you. So yes, you must have policies in place. Then once the people come in, there is also, and of course, so I will even add orientation to that because it comes with the onboarding. So all of that, one package. Then once the employees are in the organization, you bring people together from different backgrounds. So it's important that you set some parameters, some framework, some borders for them to work within. And so that calls for a code of conduct and ethics policy. So how should the employees conduct themselves? What behavioral expectations do you have of them? And what ethical standards are you setting for them? Then there's also time off or leave policy, and that specifies paid time off, holidays, leave procedures, how one can activate this leave policy. If someone is sick, what happens? And sometimes you can have a situation where someone can be sick for an extended period. If you don't have any policy for that, you as the HR practitioner will be found wanting because a departmental head will come and tell you that, Charlie, my guy has been off for 1 month, sack him. Because there's nothing. So as a line manager, he is looking at productivity. And he cannot have somebody sitting at home for 1 month and not working. So they will feel that, of course, the person should be sacked. So the HR has to be proactive and make sure that you've outlined some of these policies to avoid being confronted with such a situation. Then, pay is important. So there's a compensation policy, which will go with usually there's a grading. So what do you pay somebody at a particular grade? And obviously you would have done a job evaluation to value the jobs and make sure that, okay, this job will be assigned this grade, and this is how we go about our compensation. What are the categories, the pay structures, the benefits, and all of that. Then there's training and development policy, and performance management and evaluation, disciplinary policy, very important. Termination or exiting, if people will exit, whether they are resigning, they are retiring, or you have to fire them, how do you go about it? Very, very important to have these in place. Then there's workplace health and safety. You bring people into your organization, and you have to make sure that you are not leaving them to their own devices. If something happens to them, you may be liable. So you have to put in place such a policy. Then there is anti-bullying and harassment, including sexual harassment. Very important. When you bring young men and young women together in the same establishment, they spend most of their time together. So you have to set rules for them. Before you know it, they are bringing you issues that you have to go to court. Then there's communication. You must have a communication policy that fosters encourages open communication and outlines the channels and feedback mechanisms and what have you. Then these days diversity and inclusion is very important. So that's also you have to think about it. Confidentiality and data protection. Yes, you must have something in place for that. Then compliance with either labor laws or industry specific laws. For example, if you're in the banking industry, maybe BOG has set a certain guidelines for banks. You must find a way and bring that within the HR policy so that your employees know that aside anything else, they also have to follow these industry specific rules. I think so. Yes, there's IT policy. Yes, you work with IT systems, so IT policy, and then yes, social media and online presence policy. You see, these days we spend most of our times on social media. If you don't set rules, somebody will be wearing your T-shirt, as in company T-shirt, and be doing their own things on social media, and that can have negative implications on your brand. So make sure you set rules. Yes, people have the right to go wherever they want to go, to do whatever they want to do on social media, but they must know that they should operate within. They should make sure there is no comeback on the organization based on what they do out there. So yes, I know I've not covered everything, but I've given a lot that people can work with. But if there are maybe specific questions, maybe I can take them. But I believe these are key policies that we must have in place. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. I think you've touched on a whole lot, and it's not easy, but it's very necessary for all these points to be included in our policies to safeguard our organizational culture and climate and everything that has to do with the organization, protecting the employee, the employer at all times. I'm particularly pleased that you mentioned one of the core policies, which is the anti-harassment policy, right?
Yes.
I think some time back we had the opportunity to sit in a meeting, and other professionals, HR professionals were there, and like 90% of us there did not have any clause in our HR policies covering sexual harassment at the workplace. And at the end of that workshop, I think we all agreed that it is very necessary for us to include sexual harassment clauses in our policies to help protect our employees from everything that comes with sexual harassment. And then the social media as well. I'm grateful you've been able to touch on that as well, because it's important for the employee to protect the company at all times. And it's the policy that will ensure that we are letting the employees do what they have to do at all times. All right, so, but before we go on, I would like to go through our chat box and acknowledge some of our people in there. So we have Eben Kojo Kwakwa. Say hi, Eben. Hi. Eben watching from Accra. Said that is the best. Said that is the best. Yes. And then the Selassie Semavo Tamaklo. I feel great to be here. Selassie, it's good to have you here. And we have Alaji Malik. Assalam, General. Happy to see you here. So, is it too much? Alaji
Yes,
Malik is
I
pleased
know,
to
I
see
know.
you here.
Yes, I know him.
Yes. Mr. Charles Loco says hello. Mr. Charles Loco, we are grateful you've been able to join us. We are grateful you've all been able to join us. I see a few questions, but once Mr. Suman to address a few points, then we can come back to the chat box and address some of the questions in the chat box. So, Mr. Suman, a build up to the question that I asked earlier on the core HR policies every organization should have in place. I'm thinking, how often should we have reviews done on our policies and updates done on the policies? And then to add on, what will be the consequences of not having a comprehensive HR policy in place? What will be the consequences on the organization that fails to have a comprehensive HR policy in place? Yes, please. These are my two questions for you.
Okay, thank you, Etonam. So, well, there's no rule on how often you must review the policies, but per practice, in fact, in my own practice, I have gone with reviewing policies every 2 years maximum. However, there must also be flexibility regarding how policies are reviewed, because people management is dynamic. Sometimes certain things will happen that will call for a review of the policy. If you realize that maybe there are some loopholes that, if you are not careful, will defeat the purpose of the policy, then you may have to review it. And especially, now, HR people, we like catchphrases. We are now in a VUCA world, you know. Some people call it Barney world. Recently, I even found a new one, Tuna world. So the world is changing. So, for example, when COVID happened, HR practitioners had to quickly start coming up with policies like work from home and stuff like that. So we must always be scanning the environment and find out how things are panning out. Our job is to regulate human behavior and what have you. So it's important that we are flexible enough. Even if you have a policy of reviewing policies every 2 years, you don't wait until the 2 years before you do that. So that's the flexibility I spoke about. Then you also mentioned the consequences of not having comprehensive HR policies in place. Okay, so I believe that one of them will be inconsistent treatment of employees. Really, if there's no standard, then everybody, it's a free for all. Really, so but it's important that you people are treated equally. There's no favoritism, discrimination. And so that's one thing you get if there are no set policies in place. There will be a lot of unequal treatment, favoritism, discrimination, and what have you. There will also be poor employee morale and engagement, just because there are unclear expectations, inconsistent application of policies, lack of transparency, and all of that would demotivate employees. So you have poor employee morale on your hands. There will be lack of accountability and transparency, because, of course, there are no clear policies. So managers and employees may not be held accountable. Each I do something, you are asking me why I did that, and I'm asking you, why are you asking me why I did that? You've not set any parameters for me. So, and then when that happens, line managers or persons in charge may take the laws into their hands, even when someone has done something that they should be commended. If I don't like you, then I will say that you've not done what I like, because at the end of the day, it's up to me, and that will increase workplace conflicts and disputes. There'll be liability and reputational damage on the employer. If people are not treated well, sometimes whilst they are there, they may keep quiet, but they will leave your employment, and if you are not careful, you have suits on your hands, like harassment, bullying. People can see you because the employer has a duty of care to protect employees. So if you've not set the parameters and other employees are able to have their way, or bully others or harass others, then it's like you have created the enabling environment for such unwholesome behaviors to go on. And so as an employer, there will be reputational damage, and again, even legal issues. You have legal issues because there will be violation of laws and regulations, just because you have failed to put in place measures in your company in line with the laws of the country. We can also talk about increased staff turnover, which indirectly will also, or directly will also cause you increased recruitment costs. Because if people are not happy how they are treated, then it will cause some of them this dissatisfaction, and they will leave. And then there will be difficulty in attracting top talents, because word will go around that your company is like a jungle. There are no rules. So who want to work for a company like that? And it can result in business disruption. Of course, worst case, if somebody sues you and they are successful, it may cost you a lot of money that if you're a small company without deep pockets, that can even collapse your company. So I believe that having a comprehensive HR policy in place helps mitigate this risk, ensure fair, efficient, and productive work environment. Yeah. Etonam, are you there?
I'm here. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, please. Okay. I think I lost you in the last few seconds, but essentially the take home on the consequences that we've gotten is difficulty in attracting top talents, increase in turnover, increase in recruitment cost, among other things, are the consequences HR professionals would have and the organization would have if we don't have comprehensive HR policies in place. Thank you very much, Sam. Once again, I want to welcome everybody who might have joined midway. This is the SEDAT HR Digest. We are live every Sunday from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. And this is a great opportunity for us to learn as HR professionals, to share and to grow. And we have Mr. Abubakar Kwame Isuman, taken us through drafting employment contracts and HR policies. We have a few people in the chat box who would like to acknowledge. We have Jamila Ibrahim says hi. Hi, Jamila. And we have Ellen Jijo. Ellen here learning a lot. Hi, Ellen. I'm also learning a lot, and I'm glad you're learning a lot. And for everyone who is tuned in, I am hoping we are all jotting down some notes because I am learning some valuable lessons from Mr. Isuman. Yes, please. Okay, so we'll go for a short breather. When we come back, we'll look at some questions in the chat box. And if we have some time, Mr. Isuman will go through some more questions for you. Then we can wrap up for the day. So stick and stay with us. We would be right back in a few minutes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tropical storms, flooding, wildfires, drought, shrinking fish catch. In a world of ever-increasing uncertainty, nothing is predictable. The smallest stumble or fumble easily ends in a mighty tumble, with your world crashing down around you. Don't crumble. Glyco always has your back. Glyco, we cushion you for life.
Welcome back. I was just trying to take some notes down before complete some of my notes before we go back, but you're welcome back to the HR Sedat Digest, brought to you by Sedat Consults. And today we are tackling the topic drafting employment contracts and HR policies. And we have our Honorable Mr. Abubakar Kwame Suman giving us some great nuggets, some great insights, some new learning, and we are grateful for the opportunity. Thank you very much, Mr. Suman. Would want to take some questions from the chat box, and Mr. Suman, I'll be throwing those questions your way for you to address some of the questions in the chat box. Right. So I think the very first question we have is from Mr. Archibald Mengo. And the question is, how long must an employee be on contract per the employment laws? And if a staff has been on contract over the contract duration and has not been moved on to a permanent role, what is your advice? Stacey?
Yes, good question. So when it comes to the law, if you hire someone on a temporary contract, like casual or temporary, and the person stays on your books for 6 months, you may as well treat the person like a permanent employee. It's the reason why for a fixed term contract, right from the onset, you know that I'm hiring you for 2 years for this kind of job. And after that, there is no renewal. I need you to do this job for 2 years, and after that, you move on. You see, the spirit of the law is to prevent employers from taking advantage of workers. So we don't want a situation where you hire somebody as a temporary employee. The person is doing the job that you must hire a permanent employee to do, but because you don't want to give the full benefits to the person, then you give the person a 2-month contract, you renew it for another 2 months, another 3 months. Before you know it, the person has worked for you for the whole year, but you are treating the person as a temporary employee. The law frowns on that. But if from the onset you know that I need this person to do this job for one year, I hire you, we negotiate the terms of that 1-year contract. So it's a fixed term. That's why it's called fixed term. So, and these are not renewable contracts that at the end of the day, you will be taking advantage of the employee. If after the person working for you for a fixed term, let's say 1 year, you believe that, okay, this is somebody I want to have permanently in my employ, then you can convert the person to a permanent employee. But I will not advise, it's not advisable to keep renewing contract for a temporary employee and just be keeping them at that level. They if they decide to take you on, they may have some reliefs against you. So that is what I would say to this question.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mingo, I hope your question has been answered well. Mr. Charles Loco, okay, so there's mental health policy, BI, PSE, AI, IT, HR manual, dress code, SM policy, and ethics policy. Okay, so I want to believe he is giving us some suggestions on the core HR policies every organization should have. Okay, all right. So there's Jamila Ibrahim, hi. There's Godana Dako, hi. Okay, then there's George Bosso. Hi, this is George Bosso Hendrick watching live from a nice program. I hope more programs should continue to come. Sure thing, George. Stay tuned every Sunday from 4 to 5 p.m. every Sunday, and you'd get the opportunity to learn everything HR on HR Digest. Proudly brought to you by Sedat Consult. Usman Mohammed says, hello, Elom. Aku Walanyo says, learning a lot here. Yes, I am learning a lot here. Mamiesi Esawa, awesome presentation. Mr. Suman, you are really doing a good job. Zinabu Idrisu, good evening, sir and madam. Great job. Thank you, Zinabu and Mr. Suman. Great job. All right, so I think that will be it for the questions in the chat box. But please feel free to send in your questions, your suggestions, and we'll be glad to read them out and have them addressed by Mr. Isuman. All right, Mr. Isuman, moving on to, we've spoken a bit about compliance when we're talking about the employment contracts. And I know you spoke a bit about some of the laws and regulations like the LIs, the Labor Act, and all. So I'd like to know what the implications are, what the implications of non-compliance are with the employment laws and regulations, the implications of non-compliance on the part of the HR and then the organization as a whole.
Okay, great question. In terms of the implication, I'll look at it two fronts. Some of the implications will be external, and some of them will be internal. So on the external ones, you can have legal penalties or fines, lawsuits, and legal action from employees or former employees, damage to your reputation and the brand of the company, loss of business and revenue. Imagine you are caught to be using child labor, for example. Okay, it can cost you, your business or revenue. Then high legal fees and costs. If you have suits and charges against you all the time, you'll be losing money. Some of it can even lead to criminal prosecution. Revocation of licenses and permits, again, another external reputation, and then also negative publicity and media attention. Internally, low employee morale and engagement. And sometimes when employees know that an employer is cutting corners, employer is not following the law, it can lead to high turnover and absenteeism, decreased productivity. If you as the employer, you are cutting corners, you are not following the law, then why should they, the employees, be breaking their backs for you? You have difficulty in attracting and retaining top talent because word will get around. Yes, some people, because there are no jobs, yes, as for some people, they work for you, whatever, but will you be getting the top talent? Top talents are in high demand, so they will go where the organizations ethos and principles aligns with their own personal value system. Then you can have issues of breach of contract, conflict with unions. That's a big part that I have to watch. If you're a unionized organization, then you always have issues with the union. If you don't have a union and you do such things, in fact, it's a recipe for the workers to want to unionize. So we need to watch that. So basically, yes, loss of credibility and what have you. So these are some internal consequences for not following regulations.
Okay. I think we have some questions in the chat box that I would want us to address before we go on with it. So okay, so on the screen we have Alex in Interior Ampoma. In what circumstances is it better to issue a variation to contract letter rather than reissue the whole contract? Also, is it ever appropriate to just send an email or letter informing of a contract change rather than issue a variation to contract letter? Okay, so there are two questions. So, Mrs. Wan, okay, let me read the second one and then. Is it too extreme to have a social media policy that prevents employees from openly naming their workplace as part of their profile? This is because the behavior of employees can directly affect the company their profiles clearly shows, right? So, Mr. Suman, please, the question
Okay,
from Mr. Intiri
right.
Ampoma. Yeah.
Kindly leave the question there whilst I answer it so that I don't lose any of them. So basically, variation to contract circumstances that require of you to do that. Of course, if again, the original contract should make room for variation to be done to the contracts. That's very important. That is instances where variation can be done. If it's part of the original contract, that is perfect. And there are things that will come up, issues that will come up that fundamentally will go to the core of the employment contract. So if such situations change, then you can vary the contract. However, if in cases where you have a policy, an HR policy that you've indicated in the employment contract that the person is bound by the policy as well, you can review the policies anytime, any day, without necessarily going back to vary the employment contract. So once you do that, then you are home and dry, except for maybe fixed term policies or maybe contractors, people you've hired, for a specific period of time who are not, who are not bound by your employment policies. Then you can have clauses in there to indicate that yes, these the contract can be reviewed based on XYZ, and any situation that come up that goes to the core of the so for example, if the job they're about to do or you've had them to do is going to change from what has been listed in the contract, then you can do the variation to the contract. And I will not advise just sending an email. Remember, the contract is a signed document. When we were listing the clauses or things that should be found on the contract, the signatures of the parties to the contract was there. So don't just send an email. You can do an addendum, and then so that both parties will sign onto it to show their agreement to the contract. Is it too extreme to have a social media policy that prevents employees from openly naming their workplace? I would say it is extreme. Social media platforms include work-related platforms. So, for example, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a professional social media platform, and you should be able to indicate that you work for company A or company B. So what I would rather recommend is that your social media policy should be detailed enough to even indicate maybe what platforms certain things can be done or not. But to issue a blanket policy to say that employees cannot name their organizations on their social media, for maybe places like, okay, no, I don't want to mention any size, so it's fine. But I believe you can design the policy such that you're able to give some flexibility rather than giving a blanket policy. But again, I would say context is important. I don't know what industry you are in. Maybe for your industry, you want to, if you are a company that does covert operations, for example, you don't want people to know that you exist or people work for you. So then you can say that if you work in a covert organization, then your job basically is covert. So, for example, those who do the undercover investigations, you don't want to let everybody know that, well, I work for this organization as a covert investigator. That would defeat the purpose. So I believe context is important, and but generally the policy should be said that you're able to nail down exactly what people should do and should not do, and not just give a blanket directive. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Suman. Mr. Alexander, I am hoping your question has been addressed. And if you need any clarity, we are here at Sedat Consults. We'll be willing to address it further if you need it to be. But thank you, Mr. Suman. I think you have addressed the question as it is. The next question is from Educhum Ajiman. What's your take on employer engaging on employee on a 2-year fixed contract, and after that, the employee's appointment is regularized?
Yes, I think I mentioned earlier in my submission that sometimes the employer can use the fixed term contract period to assess the employee. So maybe you had an employee to do something specific for a year or two, and after that you deem the employee to be of a character or a performance level that you want to keep. Nothing stops the employer from doing that. In fact, I will even encourage that. What is not encouraged is to keep extending contracts for employees, because that smacks of taking undue advantage of them. If you want their services, if you know they are capable, then why are you keeping them as contracts and not regularizing their employment. So that is what I will advise against. But if you can regularize them because you deem them to be fit and proper for the organization, then why not?
Okay. So, next question is, what happens when your employer administration, sorry, let me take that again. What happens when your employer administration, no, what happens when your employer administration abusing their powers for their own criminal mischief use against their low level of employees? Their low level employees, sorry.
Etoram, I don't know if you understand the question, but I don't.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
So maybe he can come, he can clarify.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
Mr. Chris Ritchie, adventurous. Maybe you can reword it and then help us understand your question. So, moving on to Aku Walanyo, what's the best duration for probation?
I'll go for 6 months. I'll go for 6 months and also leave room for a 3 month extension, which will take it to 9 months. If I'm still not sure about the employee, then I'll have to disengage. But 6 months, I think, is a fair period to assess an employee's suitability for the job.
Okay. All right. So I have one here, Zinabu Idrisu. Please, can an employment contract letter be recalled for corrections after signing by both sides? That's from Zinabu Idrisu.
Okay, so Zinabu, in as much as yes, errors, if it's an error, it's an error. But I will advise HR professionals to desist from making certain basic and fundamental errors to recall employment letters. It doesn't inspire confidence. There's a contract, you hire somebody. So make sure that the process of putting in place a contract is robust. If you have a legal department, have your legal department review the contract. If you don't and you want to make use of an external legal firm, get somebody to review it for you, or you can get an HR, an experienced HR consultant, somebody who has practiced over a long period of time to review some of these documents for you. Sometimes it is very embarrassing when you see certain documents churned out by HR people. I won't advise that. Let's of course, if it happens, you can recall and correct it, but the point is that let's avoid that.
Okay, so let's avoid uh, the simple mistakes, the petty mistakes, and be very thorough with the drafting and the construction of these policies, so we don't put some doubts in our employees' minds, right, Mr. Suman? Thank you very, very much. Um, I'm sure a lot of us have a lot of questions. I also have a lot more questions, but time would not um, allow us to delve more into this. It's been an interesting conversation. It's been insightful. I've learned a lot. You should see my notes here. And I'm hoping audience have also been able to gather as much as they can gather from this. And we are looking forward to another opportunity where we can delve deeper, skew it down to the various areas and learn more to help us in drafting our employment contracts and HR policies. Thank you, Mr. Suman, for your time. Thank you for the nuggets. Thank you for the insights you've shared with us so far. For our audience, you can always reach out to us at Sedat Consult if you need any further clarification, and we'll be glad to connect you to Mr. Suman or any of our seasoned professionals to take you through all the questions you may need some assistance with. On this note, I just want to say a big thank you to Mr. Suman for the time and for taking us through the various topics and answering all our questions. I want to believe everybody who asked a question has been answered, because for me, all my questions have been answered and answered perfectly. So, Mr. Suman, we are grateful. Sedat Consult is grateful. Everybody who's tuned in is grateful. To everybody who joined in, we are grateful. You could take some time off your Sunday to join us and engage with us. As I mentioned earlier, HR Digest is a beautiful platform for us HR professionals to connect, to engage, to learn, and above all, to grow, because we need to grow to make it a better profession for all of us. So on behalf of Sedat Consults, we say thank you. And to Sedat, this wouldn't be possible without the initiative from Sedat. So we are grateful to Sedat as well for granting us this wonderful platform to learn every Sunday. I saw a comment that said, I can't really see it now, but the person was asking, is it just in Ghana? No, you can connect everywhere once you have social media platforms that we are live on every Sunday. You can connect on HR Digest with us. So thank you very much, everybody. Mr. Suman, I can't thank you enough. Thank you. And we are looking forward to another opportunity where we can dive deeper into this topic.
It's a
Thank you
pleasure.
very much.
It's a pleasure.
All right. Enjoy your Sunday, everybody, and may the week be good for everybody who tuned in. And may our HR professions grow with everything we've learned today. Thank you very much.